It all started with a simple desire to bring a little color into my life. I had just moved into my new home in the quaint suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates, a place where every house looked like it had been stamped out of the same mold. The lawns were perfectly manicured, the shrubs were trimmed into geometric shapes, and the only flowers allowed were the ones that came in shades of beige. It was a place where conformity reigned supreme, and individuality was as welcome as a skunk at a garden party. But I wasn't one to conform. I had always been a bit of a free spirit, someone who believed that life was too short to live in a world devoid of color. So, when I moved into my new home, one of the first things I did was plant a small flower bed along the front walkway. It wasn't much, just a patch of sunflowers, daisies, and a few wildflowers I had picked up at the local nursery. But to me, it was a little slice of heaven, a way to bring a bit of nature into the otherwise sterile landscape of Willow Creek Estates. I should have known that any attempt at beauty would be met with swift and merciless opposition from the Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA in Willow Creek Estates was notorious for its strict rules and regulations, and its president, a man named Harold Jenkins, was the self-proclaimed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics. Harold was the kind of man who measured his grass with a ruler, alphabetized his canned goods by expiration date, and had a wardrobe that consisted entirely of pressed khakis and polo shirts. He was the king of conformity, and unfortunately for me, he had taken a particular dislike to my little flower bed. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a sharp, insistent knock on my door one Saturday morning. I opened the door to find Harold standing on my porch, his clipboard clutched in his hand like a weapon. His expression was a mixture of disapproval and righteous indignation, and I knew immediately that I was in for a lecture. "Ms. Thompson," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I'm afraid I must address a matter of grave concern." I feigned innocence. "What about, Harold?" "Your flower bed," he said, gesturing towards my carefully arranged patch of sunflowers and daisies. "It's unkempt. It's disorderly. It simply does not conform to the aesthetic standards of our community." I tried to remain calm. "They're flowers, Harold. They're supposed to be a little wild." "They're weeds," he retorted, his lips pursing in disapproval. "And weeds are not permitted in Willow Creek Estates. You need to replace them with HOA-approved shrubs immediately." I could feel my temper rising, but I bit my tongue. Arguing with Harold was like trying to reason with a brick wall. He was a man who lived and breathed the HOA rulebook, and he wasn't about to budge on this issue. True to form, Harold didn't just complain to me directly. He weaponized the HOA, unleashing the full force of its bureaucratic might upon my unsuspecting flower bed. Within days, I received an official notice printed on crisp HOA-branded stationery. The notice informed me that my flower bed was in violation of the HOA's approved landscape design and that I needed to replace it with grass or HOA-approved shrubs immediately. The words were in bold, all caps, as if my colorful blooms were a threat to national security. The notice went on to cite some obscure bylaw about maintaining a cohesive community aesthetic and preventing visual chaos. It threatened escalating fines and potential legal action if I failed to comply within 14 days. I was furious. My little flower bed was a threat to the neighborhood? It was a few sunflowers and daisies, for heaven's sake. It wasn't a jungle. The sheer pettiness of it all was astounding. The Willow Creek Estates HOA, it seemed, had nothing better to do than micromanage their residents' landscaping choices and enforce a beige-toned dictatorship. I had heard stories, of course, whispers of other HOA battles. Mrs. Gable and her overly pink flamingos. Mr. Henderson and his bird bath that was attracting the wrong sort of birds. Even young Timmy Smith and his lemonade stand, shut down for being an unlicensed business. But this was different. This was personal. I tried to reason with Harold. I explained that the flowers were attracting pollinators, that they were adding beauty to the neighborhood, that they were, in fact, quite harmless. I pointed out that other houses in the neighborhood had flower beds, some even more unkempt than mine. "Those are established gardens, Ms. Thompson," Harold retorted, his eyes narrowing. "Yours is new and non-compliant." He refused to budge, his mind seemingly made up, his clipboard his only source of truth. I stood in my front yard, staring at the offending flower bed, the HOA's violation notice crumpled in my hand. I could comply, of course. I could rip out the flowers, replace them with grass or some bland HOA-approved shrubs, and surrender to Harold Jenkins' demand for uniformity. But something inside me rebelled. This wasn't just about a flower bed. It was about principle. It was about the right to express my own individuality, to add a touch of color to my own property without being harassed by a power-hungry, aesthetically challenged tyrant. If Harold and the HOA were so obsessed with uniformity, with control, with approved landscaping, then I'd give them something they couldn't control. I'd give them the opposite of a flower bed. I'd give them a sunflower field. The idea came to me in a flash of inspiration. A full-blown sunflower field in my front yard. It was landscaping, wasn't it? It was technically a garden, which, according to the HOA bylaws, was permitted. And it was, without a doubt, the most gloriously inappropriate response to Harold Jenkins' demand for conformity that I could possibly imagine. The HOA rules mention non-functional decorative gardens being banned, but a sunflower field? That was a new one. It was a loophole, a way to exploit the system's own absurdity, a chance to turn their obsession with rules against them. It was a plan so audacious, so unexpected, so utterly unlike anything they had ever seen that it made me grin. Harold Jenkins, I declared internally, a surge of defiant energy coursing through me. You want a war on wildflowers? You've got one. Prepare to be sunflowered. It was time to escalate. It was time to fight back. It was time to plant some sunflowers. A lot of sunflowers. The next logical step was figuring out how to actually grow sunflowers, and more importantly, how to do it in a way that would maximally annoy Harold Jenkins without technically breaking any laws or HOA bylaws. My browser history went from best wildflower varieties to sunflower growing techniques, and is it legal to build a scarecrow in your front yard in record time? I felt like I was prepping for the SATs, only instead of studying vocabulary, I was cramming on seed spacing, soil pH, and the best time to plant sunflowers for maximum height. The HOA bylaws, bless their beige-loving hearts, were surprisingly vague on the topic of sunflower fields. They encouraged gardens, actually, probably envisioning neat little rows of tomatoes and zucchini, not a towering wall of sunflowers. There was that bit about non-functional decorative gardens being banned, but a sunflower field? That was a new one, even for them. And height restrictions? Nope, nothing. It was like they'd never even considered the possibility of someone weaponizing agriculture. I grinned. This was going to be fun. The trip to the garden supply store was an experience. I walked in, a city girl in slightly too clean jeans, and announced, I need enough sunflower seeds to plant my entire front yard. The clerk, a guy who looked like he'd wrestled alligators for fun, just raised an eyebrow. Your entire front yard? Yep, I said, trying to sound confident. Going for a rustic look. Rustic, huh? He chuckled. Well, you've come to the right place. What kind? Dwarf sunflowers? Giant sunflowers? The kind that grow taller than your house. I blinked. The kind that grows tall. He grinned. I've got just the thing. He led me to a bin overflowing with sunflower seeds, enough to cover a football field, or, in my case, a suburban front yard. I left the store with a bag of seeds, a sense of purpose, and a growing sense of satisfaction. This was going to be epic. Getting the yard ready was less fun. My flower bed was easy enough to clear out, a bittersweet goodbye to the sunflowers, but a necessary sacrifice in the war against beige. Then came the tilling. I rented one of those rototiller machines, the kind that looks like a lawn mower on steroids. It promptly tried to buck me off like a mechanical bull. Having fun there, neighbor? A voice called out. It was Mrs. Gable, peering over the fence with a mixture of amusement and concern on her face. Just, aerating the soil, I yelled back, wrestling with the tiller. Promoting healthy root growth. I'm pretty sure she didn't believe me, but she just smiled and shook her head. Harold, on the other hand, was not smiling. He stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching me with the intensity of a hawk eyeing a particularly plump field mouse. He didn't say anything, but his glare spoke volumes. It said, You're up to something, Thompson, and I'm going to find out what it is. Challenge accepted, Harold. Challenge accepted. The sunflowers grew and grew and grew. It was like watching a time-lapse video, only in real time. One day, I had bare dirt. The next, tiny green shoots. And then, seemingly overnight, towering stalks that dwarfed my house. My front yard was no longer a yard. It was a field, a sea of yellow and green, rustling in the breeze, creating a surprisingly soothing sound. Unless you were Harold Jenkins, in which case it probably sounded like the trumpets of the apocalypse. The neighbors were, shall we say, intrigued. At first, there were the cautious glances, the whispered conversations, the "what on earth is she doing?" looks. But then the curiosity kicked in. "So, Emily, Mr. Henderson said, sidling up to me one afternoon, growing a little sunflowers, are we?" "Yep," I said, popping a sunflower seed into my mouth. It wasn't quite ripe yet, but I was committed to the bit. Going for that amber waves of grain look. Very patriotic, don't you think? He chuckled. It's certainly something. Even the kids loved it. They'd play hide and seek amongst the stalks, imagining themselves as explorers in a vast green jungle. It was the best and cheapest entertainment in Willow Creek Estates. Harold, of course, was losing his mind. He'd stomp past my house, his face a mask of fury, muttering about eyesores and property values and the complete and utter degradation of suburban aesthetics. And then I added the scarecrow. Not just any scarecrow, mind you. This one was special. It wore an old polo shirt and khakis I'd found at a thrift store. I topped it off with a pair of oversized glasses and a meticulously crafted clipboard made of cardboard. It was a masterpiece. I named him Mini Harold. "Just keeping the birds away, Harold," I yelled cheerfully as he stormed past, his eye twitching uncontrollably. He didn't reply. He just kept walking, faster this time, his sensible shoes clicking furiously on the pavement. By midsummer, my front yard was a full-blown sunflower field. The stalks were taller than me, the leaves rustled in the breeze, and the flowers were starting to bloom. It was a magnificent sight, a testament to the power of nature and a healthy dose of spite. It was magnificent. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. And it was all completely, 100% HOA loophole exploiting and possibly a little bit insane. I thought, surveying my handiwork, it was time for the final touch, the detail that would truly solidify my status as the sunflower queen of Willow Creek Estates. I commissioned a small wooden sign, hand-painted with rustic lettering. It read, in bold, playful letters, "Welcome to Jenkins Family Farms." I mounted the sign at the edge of my property, near the sidewalk, where it would be clearly visible to every passerby, and most importantly, to Harold Jenkins. It was the perfect finishing flourish, the cherry on top of my sunflower sundae. It was a declaration of ownership, a tongue-in-cheek nod to the absurdity of the situation, and a constant, unavoidable reminder of Harold's impending doom. The stage was set. The sunflowers were high, and the battle for suburban supremacy was about to reach its climax. The unveiling of Jenkins Family Farms was a moment I'd been eagerly anticipating, and Harold Jenkins' reaction did not disappoint. It was a meltdown of epic proportions, a Karen-esque explosion of rage and disbelief that would forever be etched in the annals of suburban legend. It was a Saturday morning, and I'd strategically positioned myself on my porch, sipping coffee and pretending to read a book, waiting for Harold's daily property inspection walk. And right on cue, he rounded the corner, his khakis pressed, his polo shirt tucked in, his clipboard clutched tightly in his hand. He saw the sunflower field, and he stopped. His reaction was physical. It was like watching a cartoon character whose head was about to explode. His jaw dropped, his eyes widened, and his face went through a series of colors that I didn't even know were possible. He sputtered. He stammered. He made a series of incoherent noises that sounded like a strangled goose attempting to yodel. Then the screaming started. This is unacceptable," he shrieked, his voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass, and probably set off car alarms. He stormed towards my house, his sensible shoes clicking furiously on the pavement, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. "You've turned your front yard into a farm. It's rural." I emerged from behind a particularly tall sunflower stalk, a picture of calm, unruffled composure. "Good morning, Harold," I said, my voice dripping with feigned politeness. "I see you've noticed my new landscaping. What do you think?" I was going for a rustic yet sustainable vibe. "It's sunflowers," he roared, his face now a shade of purple that I'd previously only seen on particularly ripe eggplants. It's tall. And there could be raccoons." He seemed particularly horrified by the possibility of raccoons, as if they were some kind of mythical sunflower-loving beasts that would descend upon the neighborhood and wreak havoc. "It's a garden, Harold," I corrected him gently. "Perfectly within the HOA guidelines. You said no to non-functional decorative gardens, remember? This," I gestured towards the towering stalks of sunflowers, "is highly functional. I plan to harvest the seeds." But it's a field," he sputtered, his voice cracking with desperation. It's unsuburban. It doesn't blend in. I'm promoting sustainable urban agriculture, Harold," I explained with a perfectly straight face, "and providing a habitat for local wildlife. Plus," I added with a wink, "I think it adds a certain je-ne-sais quoi to the neighborhood. A touch of rustic charm." Watching Harold's face contort with rage and disbelief was more satisfying than any perfectly arranged flower bed could ever be, I thought, struggling to suppress a laugh. He was practically vibrating with indignation, his perfectly pressed khakis threatening to spontaneously combust. It was a performance for the ages, a meltdown of epic proportions, and I was enjoying every second of it. Harold, predictably, called an emergency HOA meeting, demanding the immediate removal of my agricultural abomination. He envisioned a swift condemnation, a unanimous vote to dismantle my sunflower field, a restoration of order and beige to Willow Creek Estates. He was, as usual, in for a rude awakening. The meeting, held in the same beige-walled community center room, which I noticed was starting to look even more drab in comparison to my vibrant yellow sunflower field, was a scene of utter chaos. Harold, looking increasingly frantic and disheveled, presented a PowerPoint presentation titled Sunflower Chaos: Why Urban Agriculture Threatens Our Suburban Way of Life. The presentation was a masterpiece of fear-mongering and hyperbole, filled with blurry photos of my sunflower field, exaggerated claims about its negative impact on property values, and a series of increasingly unlikely scenarios. Slide 1. Raccoon infestation, a threat to our pets and children, with a picture of a cartoon raccoon wearing a bandit mask. Slide 2. Excessive noise pollution. The rustling of leaves will drive us mad, with a picture of a sound wave labeled danger. Slide 3. Attracting undesirable elements. Farmers, with a picture of a silhouetted figure wearing overalls and a straw hat. Slide 4. The complete and utter destruction of our neighborhood's aesthetic harmony, with a picture of my sunflower field next to a picture of a perfectly manicured, utterly boring beige house. His arguments were met with a mixture of skepticism, amusement, and outright hostility. The other HOA members, it turned out, were not as enthusiastic about banning sunflower fields as Harold had hoped. Some were secretly impressed by my audacity. Others were simply tired of Harold's constant complaining. And a few, I suspected, were secretly hoping I'd share some of my harvest. While Harold fumed and plotted, the rest of the neighborhood was embracing my sunflower field with open arms. What had started as a source of curiosity and amusement quickly became a point of local pride, a quirky landmark, a symbol of Willow Creek Estate's slightly rebellious spirit. Families would stroll through the sunflower field, admiring the towering stalks, the rustling leaves, and the surprisingly peaceful atmosphere. Children would play hide-and-seek amongst the rows, imagining themselves as explorers in a vast green jungle. Teenagers started using the sunflower field as a backdrop for their social media posts, adding a touch of rural charm to their selfies. Even some of the older residents, the ones who'd initially sided with Harold, started to come around, admitting that the sunflower field was rather attractive and added a certain je-ne-sais quoi to the neighborhood. And then, the ultimate validation. The local farmers market contacted me, asking if I'd be willing to host a suburban harvest festival in my sunflower field. They envisioned a community event with hayrides, sunflower mazes, pumpkin carving, and of course, plenty of fresh, locally grown, or rather, yard-grown, sunflower seeds. It was a public relations triumph, a community coup, and a constant, unavoidable reminder of Harold Jenkins' defeat. The sunflower field, once a source of controversy, was now a celebrated local attraction, a testament to the power of creative landscaping and the enduring appeal of fresh produce. Harold, desperate to regain control, tried every trick in the book to force me to remove my sunflower field. He cited obscure bylaws, misinterpreted zoning regulations, and even tried to claim that the scarecrow, Mini Harold, was a safety hazard and an unauthorized structure. But it was no use. The HOA's lawyer, the long-suffering Mr. Henderson, a recurring character in my suburban battles, it seemed, was forced to explain yet again that there was nothing they could do. The sunflower field, he pointed out, is technically a garden, and the HOA bylaws explicitly permit gardens. There are no restrictions on crop selection, crop height, or the overall size of the garden. But it's sunflowers. Harold sputtered, his voice cracking with desperation. It's tall. Yes, Mr. Henderson replied with a sigh. It is. But it's also legal. I made sure to repeatedly use phrases like sustainable urban agriculture, community garden, and eco-friendly landscaping just to twist the knife a bit more. And then, the final glorious twist. The mayor of Willow Creek himself showed up at my sunflower field, accompanied by a local news crew. He praised my initiative, my commitment to sustainable living, and my creative use of urban space. He even posed for a photo with me, standing in front of the Jenkins Family Farm sign, a giant grin on his face. The news segment, which aired that evening, was titled "Suburban Resident Turns Front Yard into Thriving Sunflower Field, Defies HOA." It was the ultimate humiliation for Harold Jenkins, a public declaration of his defeat and a testament to the power of a well-placed sunflower field. The downfall of Harold Jenkins, the self-proclaimed guardian of suburban aesthetics, the terror of wildflowers, was swift and decisive. After the disastrous HOA meeting, the mayor's visit, the glowing news report, and the undeniable popularity of my sunflower field, he finally cracked. He resigned from the HOA, his letter of resignation a rambling, incoherent mess of accusations, self-pity, and thinly veiled threats. He blamed everyone but himself for his defeat, claiming he was the victim of a coordinated campaign of harassment, a neighborhood-wide conspiracy to undermine his authority, and a general decline in standards of decency and good taste. He even, in a final act of delusional grandeur, referred to himself as a martyr for the cause of suburban uniformity. Nobody bought it. Within weeks, a for sale sign appeared in front of his perfectly manicured and utterly sunflower-free lawn. He sold his house quickly, at a slight loss. The market, it seemed, was not as enthusiastic about beige conformity as he was, and moved away, presumably to inflict his brand of joyless tyranny on some other unsuspecting community. His departure was met with a collective sigh of relief, followed by a spontaneous neighborhood celebration held, naturally, amidst the towering stalks of my sunflower field. Jenkins Family Farms, as my front yard was now affectionately known, became a local legend, a quirky landmark, a symbol of the neighborhood's slightly rebellious spirit. People would drive for miles around just to see it, to take pictures, to marvel at the sheer audacity of planting a full-blown sunflower field in the middle of suburbia. It became a popular backdrop for social media posts, graduation photos, and even a few surprisingly artistic engagement announcements. Tourists, actual tourists, started showing up, asking for directions to this sunflower field house and inquiring about its history. But the best part, for me, was watching the neighborhood children interact with the sunflower field. They'd run through the rows, playing hide-and-seek, imagining themselves as explorers in a vast green jungle. They'd build forts, create secret pathways, and generally treat my front yard like their own personal playground. It was a scene of pure, unadulterated joy, a testament to the power of nature and a healthy dose of petty revenge to transform even the most sterile of environments. The sunflower field, once a source of controversy, was now a source of community pride, a place where neighbors could gather, connect, and celebrate the sheer absurdity of it all. To celebrate our victory and to officially inaugurate the sunflower field as a community asset, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue, a sunflower field cookout featuring, of course, a menu centered around the star of the show. We had roasted sunflower seeds, tossed with a variety of seasonings. We had sunflower seed bread, warm and crumbly, made with flour ground from my own harvest. We had sunflower seed butter, spread thick on slices of homemade bread. And for the adults, I even offered a special limited edition sunflower seed vodka, a surprisingly potent concoction that I'd brewed myself using a recipe I'd found online and a still I'd purchased under the guise of home brewing equipment. It was a glorious, chaotic, and utterly delicious event. Neighbors mingled, children laughed, and the air was filled with the scent of roasted seeds, wood smoke, and the sweet, sweet taste of victory. Even the scarecrow, Mini Harold, seemed to be enjoying himself, his straw-stuffed body swaying gently in the breeze, his painted-on frown somehow looking less menacing than usual. With Harold gone and the support for the sunflower field, the HOA was a changed organization. New board members were appointed, and rather than enforcing rules, they were tasked with making sure those ridiculous rules were removed. And so, I remained the unlikely sunflower queen of Willow Creek Estates, the accidental champion of suburban agriculture. My front yard, once a battleground in the war against HOA tyranny, was now a symbol of victory, a testament to the power of creative landscaping and the enduring appeal of fresh produce. It was a warm summer evening. I was sitting on my porch, wearing a straw hat, a gift from a grateful neighbor, sipping a glass of my surprisingly potent sunflower seed vodka, and watching the fireflies dance among the towering stalks of sunflowers. A new neighbor, a young couple who had just moved in down the street, walked by. "Excuse me," the woman said. "We're new to the neighborhood. We were just wondering, what's the deal with the sunflower field?" I smiled. "It's a long story," I said, "but the short version is, I had a disagreement with the HOA about a flower bed." They laughed, intrigued. "Well," the man said, "it's certainly unique." "It is," I agreed. "It is. Who knew that a flower bed and a burning desire for revenge could lead to all this? I guess sometimes you just have to plant a sunflower field to find your peace," I thought, as I watched the new neighbors walk away, shaking their heads and chuckling. I raised my glass of sunflower seed vodka in a silent toast. To Jenkins Family Farms. May it forever stand as a monument to the triumph of agriculture over conformity and a warning to all future HOA tyrants. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.